was pretty beat down, man. And he talked me off the ledge a couple times. And he said, if you just stay focused and get this thing open, the numbers will work. You know, we had lost well over 6 figures. A lot of me wanted to just take the losses and move on. The people that are closest to you telling you, this is a terrible idea. Can you really do this? Is this really the right thing? Believe in yourself. If you believe in your bones that you can change people's lives, do not let anybody talk you out of it, ever. I had to make a choice. And now looking at this big picture, we're responsible for 500 lives.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
How to develop a whatever it takes mentality. My friends, this is the theme of this particular episode. I'm so excited today to introduce you a dear friend of mine, Sean Clements, and his wife, Cheryne, who are multi-location owners up in the northern peninsula, or upper peninsula, I should say, of Michigan. And they came into our brand just around COVID, battled, overcome so much adversity to get their first doors open, and they've since then had massive success, built out multiple locations, have a thriving team, and we're going to sit down to talk to you about mindset, about that overcome mentality, and really what it is like to be a day-to-day gym owner. So very excited to introduce you today to Sean Clements.
Here we are, and just to set the tone for our audience, we're live in Cancun, just kicked off 2024. And we're one of our masterminds, which is, leadership coaching program where we pour in our franchise partners. And Sean, you've been so gracious to carve out a little time before the big event tomorrow and the next day. So really the whole goal here is just really untap your story, what it's like, not only being a gym owner, but what it was like, prior and kind of, leading up to that event. And of course, you and your wife, Cheryne, work together. So there's a lot to unpack here. Hopefully we're going to be able to provide some insight, inspire some people in the process. So my first question, my friend, is just give us the backstory, and specifically like the leading story that led you up to opening your first location.
Absolutely. So leading up to 2019, I had been in sales for, over a decade, and I had seen success with that. Built a nice life for my family. We have a nice home, and my kids are thriving, and you just felt like there was more. And I really, really wanted to be a business owner. Entrepreneurship is in my blood. It was something that both of my parents did, and I was a big part of that and seeing that growing up. And so I always wanted to really take the reins for myself. And it wasn't.
That was a thought like you grew up with, watching your parents' influence, just kind of factory installed.
Absolutely, yeah. My mother was a small business owner, used to do in-home sales, much like I was doing, and then started her own real estate company. Saw a lot of success with that, and I really, really looked up to her, and it was something that really was always a passion for me. I just didn't know where to start. And it was in 2019 where I read Bedros' book, Man Up, and that changed my trajectory.
Why? And walk us through where you were, because everyone has that moment, right? And if you're listening to this podcast, you're meant for something more. You wouldn't be watching this or listening to this if you're meant for average. And Sean, I know, from the very beginning, you're a go-getter. From the very beginning I met you, I was like, this guy's going to be super successful. And I clearly was right. So good on you. But at what point in that, 2019 journey, reading the book, what spoke to you to kind of make that switch, if you will?
Well, it was, I was doing a lot of things, hot, cold therapy, training regularly, taking care of myself, successful in sales. And I was listening to that audio in a sauna, and it got to the chapter on crop dusters and fighter jets. And it was just like a switch. What do you want to be?
For those who are not familiar, maybe haven't read Man Up, which is a shameless plug, go read Man Up. Can you give the analogy of what that was and why did it speak to you?
Well, a crop duster is somebody that is just kind of getting by, right? A fighter jet is somebody that faces life head on and takes control, action. And that was the pivot for me to take action. I picked up the phone. I called Fit Body HQ after I got through the book and understood what Fit Body really was. And then I started to understand that holy crap, this could be a real thing for my wife and I. So her and I sat down, we talked it through.
What was her reaction? And the reason I say this, just to give some context, your wife is just this badass woman, super fit. But I know in my experience and many, working with other franchise partners, some, couples are immediately on board, some actually are not. And there's, a process just to make sure the diligence before they get on board. So what was that like for you?
Well, I knew for a fact that I couldn't do it without her, number one. And her background is in fitness. She has a health and fitness management degree. She had been personal training at that time. And, we really started to look at the model and how we could absolutely help a lot more people. And I think that was her driver.
Sorry to interject there. What was she doing previously?
She was personal training at a local facility, and she'd worked at a few different places in our town in Marquette. And when I put the business side of it in front of her, I think it just clicked. She's like, yeah, we can do this.
And what was that discovery, kind of period of time? Like you're, on this growth journey. I'm just going to surmise from what I'm hearing. You're on this growth journey. You always had this kind of fire that, hey, you're meant for something more. 2019, things were happening. You read Man Up, and you're like, hey, you heard the analogy, the crop duster, the fighter jet. This is something that speaks to me. Now you sit down with your wife, Cheryne. How long was that process before both of you came out saying like, hey, this is exactly what we want to do?
It was a little bit longer for her. I was looking at it from the business lens, and the business side of things to me could work. We were going through the process with HQ at the time, and I kept pushing forward. Well, I kind of felt her pulling back a little bit, like maybe doubting a little bit that we can actually run a business. And it wasn't until we went to a Domination Workshop down in Grand Rapids, and we left that. We got in the car on Sunday to drive home, and she was like, this is it. We're doing it. And shortly thereafter, we signed the franchise agreement, and away we went to find a location.
That is awesome. I always like to say this, live events change lives.
Yeah.
And especially we can do that with a spouse or a business partner, or even your team as you build location. There's just something magical about, experiencing things together, learning things together. And once you have that paradigm shift together, it just expedites the process. One thing that you mentioned just, for Cheryne in this particular case, took a little more time to kind of warm up, which is normal, which is very, very common. In fact, in the grand scheme of things, that's probably a quicker time horizon than, even sometimes other franchise partners, other, entrepreneurs that I've coached. So that's really, insightful. Now, as you kind of transition, you went to that awesome event. You're like, hey, this is what we want to do. Sign the franchise agreement. I'm going to ask you a little bit about, the journey of opening your first location, your second, and all that. Before I do, what skill sets did you bring to the table? And then what skill set did she bring to the table? And kind of what was that conversation look like? Because it's really important, especially whomever it is, whether it's your spouse or if you're going to go with a business with other partner, you should be bringing other skill sets to the table and have really good understanding of what the vision and who's gonna do what in the partnership. So what did that look like for you?
So my background had been in sales and being involved in business up to that point, and so that was an easy transition for me to understand that in order to have a business, we need to have people. That's not necessarily her strong suit. She has the training background. She's absolutely incredible from a fitness level herself, and she was able to convey that to the members. I remember back to when we first started, now we've got workouts of the day and all those amazing things that HQ has provided. She wrote the first 400 days of workouts herself. We still have the folder full of paper, and she put so much thought and care into those workouts and how they flowed and the programming side of things, that we had a great product. And we knew that at a very, very early stage. And that was amazing to see those come together and have people just thriving within our camp.
That's awesome. And just knowing you, knowing her, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, knowing you both, you have the same values, but very different personality styles. And I think that lends itself in a very good way to a partnership, because you want to bring different aspects to the table. You know, she's a little bit more introverted, quiet, and reserved, but, you know, has a very good understanding of nutrition and fitness. And, you know, from authority perspective, we were talking about yesterday, she can, you know, she's 4 weeks away from like being show ready, you know, like from a bikini model perspective, which is wild.
Yeah.
And then you bring that business acumen. You know, you have extroverted personality, kind of a go-getter. So I would imagine, you know, with your ability to build relationships and rapport, which we'll talk about a little bit later this episode, and her ability to have like that fitness foundation, that's just kind of a partnership made in heaven.
It really was. I think that's the adverse personality types made it work, and I think that's why we were able to grow as fast as we did. She's very detail oriented, and I'm like, results and go, you know. So she is able to pull the reins back a little bit on me, and keep me in alignment with the big picture.
Yeah, that's so funny. It reminds me of very similar to my wife Tatiana and I. So, and we have another episode for you viewers out there where I interviewed Merrick, who's the founder of Take Flight Learning, which is a disc profile training company, and we talk about the birds here quite a bit. So just to give some context, in the case that you're familiar with disc and the birds, Sean is very high eagle parrot, where Cheryne, his wife's, very high owl. So that's kind of where that dynamic looks. Now, transitioning on, I want to talk a little bit also about the good, the bad, the ugly, because partnerships can be amazing. I partner with my family, my brother, my wife as well, but also too can have their fair share of challenges. So I want to unpack that a little bit. Before we do, we've kind of led up to the particular growth journey and really how this, you know, came to be. Let's talk about you getting the doors open. Can you storytell a little bit about, you know, what that was like, you know, how you launched your location, what it's like being a gym owner, like from the early days now? We'd just love to unpack that.
Absolutely. I mean, in the beginning, you're doing it all. You know, when we launched, it was myself, my wife, and 2 part-time coaches, and that's how we opened the doors. So.
And now, just talking about this last night at dinner.
And now I have a team of 12 people, 2 locations, moving into a third in late 2024. So it's been a ride.
That's so awesome, man. Couldn't happen to like better people and just salt of the earth people that just take action. I'm referring to you, your wife, your team, who have had the privilege to meet, you know, at our elite trainings and all that. So very excited for you on that level. Sean, big picture, you know, what would have been a couple of the biggest accolades, okay? And then the flip side, what have been the biggest like challenges, not only getting the doors open, but just, you know, in the last few years of business?
The last few years of business have been a wild ride, to say the least. You know, we went through our grand opening launch through the COVID pandemic.
Like when did you, let's put some dates behind this for our audience. Like when did you launch, the timing and all that?
So we opened our doors to our first location on November 9th of 2020.
November 9th. In the thick of COVID. I mean, March is when, you know, mid-March is when things went really sideways.
Yes.
But we're talking about like 6 months after like the brunt of it.
Absolutely. And so, you know, we signed our franchise agreement in late 2019, and then the objective was to first find a location. You know, it was some back and forth. You know, I had an attorney on board to review leases. We finally locked in our lease, and I say our lease, our first lease, in late December of 2019. And I went to work immediately with demolition. And this was a big haul. It was a 4,500 square foot facility in a mall complex, right on the main highway that runs through our town.
I was going to say, give some context. Where are you based out of?
So our first location is in Marquette, Michigan, which is in the heart of the Upper Peninsula. So northern Michigan. In fact, we get confused as Canada often. So.
Well, I feel like the weather is pretty similar. So
yes,
we're here in Cancun. It's probably about 75, 80. And you're just referring to it's like 40 back home. So
it's 40 back home. Yep.
Put some perspective.
Right. And so, you know, going into that first lease, it was a lot of demolition, a lot of design. You know, I had a design professional. With our location, you know, we're not very, you know, population dense. There's only about 26,000 people in my market, and we have to get people who travel into Marquette for work. So I think I might be the first fit body that even had, and I built out men's and women's locker rooms in this facility. Invested a very sizable amount of money. We were 7 months into that build, and my family was involved with it. My sons were up there, and we had
7 months in this build. So if you sign the lease December 2019, 7 months. I mean, you're building out through COVID. The world's going wild, and you're just head down getting this thing ready.
Absolutely. We were marketing, and we were pushing forward on construction. And I just had to keep reinforcing that this is the way, because there was a lot of uncertainty.
Well, dude, how'd you do that? Unpack that for me, because business and entrepreneurship, everyone wants guaranteed things in life, and business and entrepreneurship is the exact opposite of that. So walk me through your mindset and shoot me straight too. I'm sure, there was a lot of down days and low days as well. So from a mental perspective, what'd that look like? And then how did you stay focused at the task at hand?
I would say the biggest thing is I had great people around me. One specifically is my neighbor. He's a member at my Marquette camp, but he's also a trusted advisor. And there were days, and he could see it on my face, where I was pretty beat down, man. And he talked me off the ledge a couple times, and he said, if you just stay focused and get this thing open, the numbers will work. And we kept pushing forward, and we get to the point where we're primed, ready for final paint and flooring in this, pretty state-of-the-art setup with the 4.0 build out. And I had to pick up and walk away from that space. And it was a total loss.
What happened?
The landlord was in breach of the contract. There were problems with the space, and he refused to fix them. Mainly the roof was leaking, and he would not remedy it. On the other side of things, we were that group didn't do construction, so it was a construction allowance, and I was supposed to be reimbursed at certain points in the process, and those monies never came. And I kept pushing forward. Well, I was not heavy on cash, and as we moved through that, I started to get a little worried. And I remember this vividly, water pouring in on the brand new, drywall and electrical work that I had done. And I had to make a choice. And I connected with my advisor, and I talked to my attorney. We executed what was called a constructive eviction. We served the landlord with a notice. They refused to respond, and I walked out the doors. And
dude, that is wild, wild. And granted, I have not heard a specific situation like this. I've been in the game for a long time.
Sure.
But cousins of it, variations of things, and thankfully it doesn't happen often. But this is the life of an entrepreneur.
it is.
For you had to be able to just to figure it out and lean on your support system, lean on the people that are there for you. But at the end of the day, you still had to dig deep, have mental fortitude, and make tough decisions, which you clearly did.
I think at that point too, it's that crossroads. A lot of me wanted to just take the losses and move on, but something said keep going. So, at that point, we had lost well over six figures.
What were the conversations with Cheryne like? Because this is another additional element, right? And you guys are super supportive, but when in my experience, sometimes when really challenging things happen, sometimes business partners, spouses have different views on things. So I'm literally flying blind here. I'm genuinely curious. How were those conversations, and did it impact and put a stress on your relationship?
It absolutely did. To keep going through things like that, and it's hard for her to understand why it's all happening from a legal perspective. There's a lot of moving parts there, right? I was committed to a 10-year lease, and getting out of that was challenging. It was tricky. And I credit it to having the right people around me and being able to do it in a way that I was able to be free and clear of that legal obligation, and make a pivot. And we secured a second location, and that was, I think, late August. And
Which would, I guess, the second location in your attempt to open your location number 1.
Yes.
So talk us through that. What would the pivot look like, and then how'd you get the doors open?
We found a space that would work. It was an old CrossFit box that the pandemic had shut down, and a gymnastics business. So a very, very large facility. My location for Marquette is 6,200 square feet, which is, pretty sizable in comparison to some others. We secured that location. I had little to no money left at that point, but I had a skill set. So I'd been in the construction trades since I was 15 years old, and I parlayed that into doing all of the work myself, to the point where we moved stairs. We did our own paint. We built out our own reception desk, poured our own concrete countertops, all the fine 4.0 finish work. I did all of that myself, 89 days straight, and we launched November 9th of 2020.
Which, for the record, isn't in the game plan, or typically needs to be in the game plan for our Fit Body locations to open their doors.
Right.
Like I said, we've done this hundreds of times. There are things that do happen. This is definitely a very, non-common, variant for sure. But good on you for having the mental fortitude, lean on your support network. Awesome work with Cheryne on your side, and then having that adapt and overcome, and then leveraging your skill set, man. So Kudos to you. Hats off.
Yeah, and then I think the rest is history from that point, because we launched. We had 117 people opt in for our grand opening 6-week challenge. 92 of them stayed on as Fit Body members, and a lot of them are still with me today. And away we went.
Well, talk about that. The way we went. Now looking back 3 years, you kind of talked a little bit about the foundation, why and how you got started, the pivots and the adjustments you had to make to finally get your first location open, which was the second try at that first location. Now you've launched a second additional location, so a proper second location. You're looking to expand to a third. So bird's eye view. What's it been like? What's the big successes and the fulfillment, and also some not necessarily challenges that we just went through to get the doors open, but just challenges in terms of leadership and mentorship and building a team and just running day-to-day operations.
Absolutely. I think the biggest component and the glue in all of it is the fitness component. We haven't talked a whole lot about that, but Cheryne and I have really just lived a fitness lifestyle for almost 20 years. Her and I had both, competed and gone through a transformation myself, and that transformation is really the change factor for me in my life. That put me on a path to have fitness as an epicenter of my life, and it gave me so much, and I wanted to give that back. And so you asked about what my greatest accomplishment is. It's watching other people win within our system. And watching somebody completely transform their body, but not only their body, every single aspect of their life gets better. And every single aspect of everybody that they're around gets better. And for me, that is the catalyst that keeps me going every day.
And you can feel it, man. You can just sense it. And we're cut from the same cloth, right? Like, fitness had a big impact in both of our lives. We've been in it for a long time. And to be able to give that gift back to other people is just super fulfilling, especially in today's day and age when 80% of the U.S. population is either statistically obese or overweight. 20% of our child population is obese. So there's a big problem for sure. And the fact that you're just fired up, it says a lot, but it's also, when you break it down, the 3 biggest qualities that we look for, Sean, really I'm talking to our audience, to make really successful fit body owners. And number 1, passionate about fitness and people. Like, that's foundation. And ironically, even though we have an incredible business model, the owners, just like you and your wife, Cheryne, that do the best are first and foremost passionate about people and fitness and the transformation. And it just so happens the profitability is a byproduct of that. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. I think the biggest focus for anybody that's considering or going into this is you have to pour into the relationships, and you're in the people business. first and foremost. And if you focus on that, and you know, the way I coach my team is client experience, and I would put us up against any fitness business in the country as to what our client experience is like. That right there is the focus, and the rest really does start to fall in line from there.
This all in mind, kind of walk us through not only the client experience, which is obviously has to be number one. Let's talk about the team building experience, because we just talked about it. You know, you started with 2 part-time, coaches, Cheryne and you, on this mission to inspire fitness and change lives, our global mission. But now you take a look back and you're like, holy smokes, I have like a proper team. This is a full-on operation, and you're growing. So what's that journey been like to continue to develop your leadership skills and give the audience some insight, the good and the bad and the ugly, especially if, someone's listening or watching this like, man, I want to open a fitness business. Man, I want to change lives. Oh, but shoot, I didn't think about me having to develop as a person, create self-mastery, grow, and then lead other people. So what's that journey been like for you?
It's been a long journey, coming from an independent person that is results driven. My inclination is to do it myself. And it wasn't very far into the process where I realized that I cannot do it myself. And so we started with 2 part-time coaches. One of them's still with me today. He's now a head coach and client coordinator. And we've built off of that. And I think the biggest value that Cheryne and I have really created is a culture and a place where people can thrive and grow. And I've seen it with the team that is still with us, the growth trajectory of those particular people. I can't say enough about how amazing our team is. And everything that we're doing today is credit to that. But it's taken a lot of personal development on my part and Cheryne's part. That's something that we are intentional with daily.
And give us some strategies on how you do that, like books, podcasts, workshops. What's that look like for you?
And that's just like being aligned with HQ is a big part of that, because HQ puts so much energy and so much effort into, the success of the franchise partner. And I said this to my cap coach, Mike, it's pretty hard not to be successful in this brand, whether it be podcasts or elite trainings around the country. I take my team to an elite training every year. As my team grows, it's more and more people. And coming out of those trainings, they're on fire. They have some major takeaways, and then they apply them.
Live events change lives, baby.
Absolutely. World Conference, Cheryne and I have been to 2. Very, very blessed to be able to take almost my entire team to the one in Dallas this past summer. And coming out of that, the spark to at the location level has been nothing less than exceptional. Another big thing that I've done is go on a deep dive on leadership and understand that for us to be successful and move forward with the vision of what we have, and that's to change 2,500 lives, I have to be a good leader. And that's where my work is now. I work with a leadership coach in Project 1202, where I meet with him once a week, and then that goes out into my team, and I pour into them, and I'm really focused on developing other people at this point.
Oh man, love that so much. Fires me up, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes, from a growth development perspective and a leadership lens. Sean, kind of the last questions on the meat and potatoes of this particular show or the episode. Talk a little bit about skill acquisition, also zone of genius. I'm curious from your lens what skills you've had to acquire to be successful in your role. And before I do open that up, I want to preface, outside eyes looking in. I've known each other since 2019 now. A couple of zone of genius that I know to be true for you is, number one, you build rapport and relationships very strongly. So that's a skill set that I know you've developed and worked on, but certainly I believe to some level has been factory installed. You also have very high pain and risk tolerance to keep on pushing through, which I think is really important for an entrepreneurial perspective. So if you want to shed some light on your skill sets and your zone of genius specific to those two, and then just big picture, if you could address the audience and kind of walk us through what skills that, if someone watching or listening to this should expect to be able to develop in order to be successful as an entrepreneur.
Sales skills are number one, I think, and being able to ultimately have influence with people in a positive way. And really that's all sales is, right? It's influence. And so if you want to change somebody's life, you have to, quote unquote, sell them on the value of what you and how you can, be the solution to their problem. And so taking time and care and understanding what their needs are, and then making sure that your program is going to be the solution to that problem. And then the relationship side of things, because, I serve small, tight-knit communities. My Marquette location, there's about 26,000 people in that community. And my Escanaba location's about half. So for us, we don't get, 200,000 people to have an audience with. So it's the utmost importance that we're building strong relationships, because client retention is the only way that we're going to be successful long term.
And reputation, especially in your market. I feel like,
Yes.
You got one shot. If you don't deliver and your client experience isn't strong, your reputation's not going to be good, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot long term.
100%. I think the biggest skill that I've had to work on is emotional control. With my personality traits, passion, emotion gets poured into my being, right? But as a business owner, sometimes that doesn't serve you the best. And so pulling the emotion out of it and being able to look at something, and I credit a lot of this to like my cap coach Mike or your brother Barrett, being able to look at data and analyze that to make good decisions rather than making an emotional decision, I think is a skill set that can prove very valuable to somebody if they put the work in.
Heck yeah, my dude. Well, this has been awesome. We still have a few more minutes left. I have the bonus round for you, but man, just inspired, fired up, and really grateful for you to be able to share your journey and your story. Sean, as we kind of transition, I have a few moments left in the bonus round. I want to circle back to the conversation we had in the very beginning, just about the biggest value, but also some of the biggest challenges working with your spouse. Because the real thing, I work with my spouse. I'm so grateful to do so, and it's worked really well. But I also want to be real with the audience, give them the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I want to be real with the audience, be able to give them the good, the bad, and the ugly. So from your lens, specific to your working relationship with your spouse, which again, it's very common for our owners to partner with either a business partner or their spouse. What's been the biggest value in terms of working with your spouse, and what's been the biggest challenge?
Great question. I think at the end of the day, it's really strengthened our relationship because of some of the adversity that we've had to go through and that pain we've had to embrace as young entrepreneurs. We've had to go through and take some lumps that not everybody has to go through, and there's no way you can't come out of that stronger. On the back end of that, I think super important, especially if you are going into business with a spouse, is really, and this is something that we really didn't do, but we have done now, but drawing a line between personal and professional, and really creating distinct roles within the operations of the business, and making the business and the marriage, because there is a difference.
That is gold right there. Easier said than done, but
Yes.
that needs to be the focus. And if it is, that will definitely pay long-term dividends.
I think working with your spouse, especially in such a relationship-based business, I think you can hit a lot of home runs if you're in it together. You know, being able to, because really at the end of the day, I look at our membership base and there's a lot of couples, and being leading by example for the people that you're responsible for, I think it's the only way.
Amen to that. All right, Sean, same question, but not specifically, towards Cheryne, your spouse, just in general. Looking back in the last few years, what's been one of the biggest senses of pride and accomplishment of what you've done? And the flip side, what's been the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome? And maybe you've already communicated, but if you could drive that point home or list it something else.
Well, I think the biggest triumph is building the team and watching them grow. One of my proudest moments as a leader and as a business owner happened this past week, where our second location, it was a husband and wife team that took over the day-to-day operations of that. Melly has been with me from almost day one, and she's now a head coach, and she's a really, really good coach. And her growth has been from getting her CPT. Now she's PN1 certified precision nutrition, and she's helping a lot of people. We have a very strong client experience in that location. Well, she set some goals when we launched in January, and I'm very, very proud of her, but she accomplished all three of those major goals before the end of 2023. In fact, she just eclipsed the last one last week. She closed on her first home. And that, to me, was very humbling and very, very rewarding.
Well, good for her, first and foremost. And good on you, man, the leadership and the support and guidance. And I know she'd probably say the same thing. So
it was awesome. She put up a post on her personal page, and I kind of said, let's effing go. And she said, there's so many things that I want to say to you. And I said, you just did. And that was, for me, like a great big thank you. And I'm really, really proud and glad to see her growth, her and her husband. So.
And what was her name again?
Melly.
Melly, giving you a shout out. Well done,
Coach Melly, and then
vibes. Coach
Brett. Yeah, they're my rock stars in Escanaba.
Brett, there we go. Shout out to you as well, my friend.
Absolutely. The hardest part is not quitting when your body is telling you it's time, and just going one more day, putting one more day into it, and that could be the change factor for your future. And now, looking at this big picture, we're responsible for 500 lives. That's across the board in both locations. That's a big responsibility. But if we would have quit, that never would have happened. And I look back at that, and the biggest thing I can say is don't quit, because you're one more day away from making a huge, huge change in people's lives.
My man, I was actually going to ask you what would be your parting piece of wisdom for someone listening to this, knowing that they're meant for something more, they're meant for something greater, just like you, just like me, kind of had these feelings. That was an incredible way to segue, but is there anything else that you want to say to that person who knows there's something greater for them, but for whatever reason, that internal critic, that imposter syndrome voice, that area of resistance is in their ear? What would you say to that person, and why?
Absolutely 100% believe in yourself. Do not let certainly anybody around you talk you out of it, because there's going to be plenty. And it's going to come from people you'd least expect it. The people that are closest to you telling you, this is a terrible idea. Can you really do this? Is this really the right thing? believe in yourself. If you believe in your bones that you can change people's lives, do not let anybody talk you out of it, ever.
Mic drop, my friend. That's awesome. Last question to bring us home. The title of this podcast is the Fitness CEO Podcast. So, Sean, from your lens, what does it mean to be a CEO?
It's a great question, Bryce. I've thought long and hard about this, and I think the number one thing is you have to be the CEO of your own life first and foremost before you can lead other people. I think that creating strong personal excellence starts there. A leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And if you're not doing it yourself, you have zero credibility with those who follow you. I believe in that wholeheartedly, and that's been the biggest transition for myself when I, left my full-time job and went with all in with Fit Body Bootcamp. And I saw that to be the biggest transition and the biggest growth within my organization.
Well, Sean, man, you've inspired me. I know you've done that to so many other people listening today, and I want to thank you. Before we wrap today, actually, not only want to thank you, but I want to acknowledge you, not only for being just an awesome dude and a very successful Fit Body Bootcamp owner, but just being a guy that takes action, that inspires other people, that has a good servant leader heart. And Cheryne, this goes for you as well, watching at home, because you guys are just an incredible force together. It's been a pleasure watching you grow, overcome challenges, all the adversity you had to do, and create this awesome, these awesome communities, in Upper Peninsula, Michigan.
Yeah.
Not only for your clients, but also for your team and your family. That says so much, and more so than anything, though, just for you and your wife being salt of the earth, good people. I wanted to take the time to acknowledge you both for that, and thank you so much for being on the show today, my friend.
Thank you, Bryce. The opportunity to get out here and have this conversation with you. I think that our story can help someone, and there are other people out there, and the big mission that we're all on as Fit Body owners can literally change the world, and certainly the trajectory of this country. And that, for me, is really the vision.
Amen to that. Well, my dude, thank you again. And friends, I know you got a ton of value, assuming you do. One ask: share this episode with someone in need, someone who's going through a tough place, but there's something more for them. This episode will definitely impact them in a positive way. Really appreciate that. And as always, no one is coming to save you. You must save yourself, and the time is now. My dude, Sean, appreciate you, my friend. And my friends, we'll see you in the next episode.